How do they deceive in real estate? Before the video started, you said there's a whole trio deceiving everyone, right? Let's give people valuable information in this video and keep them safe, okay? Let's answer the question of what and how.
There are three parties that can really somehow deceive each other. The first is the seller, the second is the buyer, and of course the third is the realtor. In the case of renting, it's the landlord and the tenant who can also somehow interfere with each other's living. Let's discuss the cases that we know about and also answer viewers' questions on how to avoid this. The most popular type of fraud is when young guys create a YouTube channel, then spend 10 years telling everyone how they are experts. They collect a deposit, a security deposit or something for their services, and then disappear into the mist, having collected, I don't know, a couple of thousand gold coins. This is approximately the most popular. And if we speak very seriously, then probably this is exactly how you can protect yourself when working with some public figures, in fact, whose reputation has been built over years and cost them a huge amount of money. It's unlikely they would even sacrifice all of this for a big check, because most likely what they have invested in themselves or their work is worth much more. Therefore, probably in the last couple of years, everyone talks about the importance of publicity, because becoming public is, firstly, not cheap, and secondly, probably pointless if you don't want to do the work well. Well, because it only takes one mistake, and for the next 10 years everyone will only remember that, really. The first and probably the most popular type of fraud is when a scammer rents an apartment that is available for short-term rental and claims to be the owner. Most often this apartment is rented out. You come in and they push you quickly because the apartment is great and the price is low. They pressure you by saying there are 10 people in line. Either you make a decision now or you move on. It creates a sense of urgency that you must pay the deposit right away. So they immediately sign a contract with you and leave you the keys, but you have to pay right now because the next person will take the apartment. And you get the impression that yes, because the apartment is really great. What's important here is that they don't show you their documents. Everything is played out in such a way that you don't even have time to think, let alone check if they are the owner or not. And in reality, people fall for this. Both people and even inexperienced realtors fall for this too.
Yes, and what documents need to be checked? The land register, the extract, or what?
Yes, of course. Ideally, the land register extract is enough when renting to ensure that you are dealing with the owner.
So you basically take the owner's document, look at who is listed there, the name, surname, number, PSL, and compare it with the online document of the land register extract?
Yes, and if the owner refuses to give you the number of this register, you can even ask the realtor to buy the number of this register. There are different services for this, and it doesn't cost much, up to 50 zlotys. It's important that you still find this register and see the owner's document. If he refuses to give his document or the register number, most likely you're dealing with a fraudster.
And the register, in simple terms, what is it again?
A cadastral register, something similar to what exists in the BTI. And it's online, you can check it at any time, and they are open. So knowing the register number, you can access it for free on the government website. I think we can even leave a link so people can take a look. The second point, in this same rental, and in general, well, when buying, a notary won't allow it, but for a rental, the lease agreement must be signed by all owners. If an apartment has multiple owners and only one signs, then the agreement is invalid. And most often, this type of fraud occurs due to ignorance of the laws, not because someone intentionally wanted to deceive you, but simply because the owners themselves didn't know that everyone needs to sign, or if someone is absent, there should be a power of attorney for the signature, right? Because such an agreement is absolutely invalid, and in fact you can be asked to leave at any moment, and you have no guarantees, nothing at all, that would allow you to stay in that apartment.
I even know there are problems during registration. That is, you come to the registration office, want to register, a residence permit, yes, that's what it's more commonly called, and they also check this. And I have acquaintances who were refused because they were told, what's here? In the agreement, there are two people, but the signature is from one person. And when you explain to them that there is a power of attorney, there is this and that, it really heavily depends on the inspector whether they will register you or not. So it's better to have insight into what? It's better to have all the signatures of all the owners.
Not better, but mandatory. Mandatory and absolutely necessary, yes. because the agreement is actually invalid. You can have a power of attorney. That's okay. It's completely legal. And a notary will sign such an agreement if it needs to be signed. It's a normal practice. I mean, if suddenly they want to evict you, then you don't even have an official, proper agreement because it isn't signed by all parties.
Great, you've watched up to this point, so you're really interested in real estate in Poland? Support us by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and leaving a comment below the video. And if you're interested in professional assistance with buying, selling, or by renting real estate in Poland, you can contact us. Below the video, you'll find all the links. And let's continue watching the episode.
And let's not stray too far from the topic of renting. Listen, about 10 years ago, when I first arrived 10 years ago, I already saw this type of fraud, remote reservation. So, most often in these ads, there's also a great ad, a great price, and usually there's no phone number or you can never reach anyone at that number. There's an email through which you communicate and the owner is always abroad. In England, in America, something like that. And he says, yes, I'll come in a week or two. He asks, of course, when you need the apartment and so on. In general, he sets it up so that he can reserve the apartment for you. Just send 300, 500, 1,000 zlotys, anything to keep the apartment yours. And of course, that's where the contact ends. By the way, this is about remote communication via email. Everyone who has rented an apartment will tell you about this. And now a story from my brother in Kyiv. This is a verbal reservation over the phone. Exactly the same story. The apartment will be held for you. The apartment is great. Everything. This is done by a realtor, not the owner. The realtor is renting it out. And the same realtor communicates with you over the phone. And you can even hear the sound of keys clicking, the keyboard, well, the laptop keyboard. So he asks for your name, click, 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 surname, click, 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 all of that. He goes over everything. You send an official deposit via some invoice. And of course, after that, people disappear again. So reserving an apartment remotely is quite difficult. If you have a good realtor, it can be done because the realtor will verify all the owner's details on site. How can you protect yourself? Good question. It's to request from the owner, once again, all their details. The number of this same document, yes, meaning a photo of the passport and so on. Ideally, even have a video call with them to see that the person on the passport is the one communicating with you.
And not documents that he simply stole or somehow acquired.
Yes, or he just has some photos of some apartment. Well, usually scammers don't go to such lengths to find an apartment and the company under the owner's name. That would be quite difficult, but in general, it can happen. So this is why a video call, or ask a friend to go in person to check out the apartment live. If the owner is in the country, yes, let them show it. Or if they're not in the country, then via video call. Let's move on to buying. There's an interesting question. Do you think it's possible to sell the same apartment multiple times? Well, I think if you really want to, yes.
Well, simultaneously, especially if you somehow take money from everyone.
And in fact, it can even be officially sold multiple times. How does this happen? When buying an apartment at the notary's office, the notary is required to immediately enter the data into the same registry after the process. It won't state who bought what and how. This information appears in a month, 2 months, 6 months, it varies. But the time of the changes being made will be indicated immediately. So you can go into the registry, see that yes, indeed, there are already some changes, but they were made an hour ago. You don't see what changes, but it was an hour ago. This should already alert you. So many notaries, some intentionally, if the goal is to deceive someone, and some unintentionally, he might not make these changes immediately. He might need to run, forget something, do it in the evening or the next day. They might not check immediately before the purchase what changes another notary made an hour ago. Well, in general. So, it's difficult to pull this off, especially if you encounter a reasonable and competent notary. Well, if it's your notary, hypothetically, and they're not very responsible, then you could sell the apartment multiple times. And there's a saying, the last one is the father. Here it works the opposite way. Who is the first? Gets the apartment. All subsequent buyers, unfortunately, will be looking for the seller through the police if that happens. So this can actually happen. Of course, there are important factors that need to be observed, But if you're in collusion with the notary, or if you are the notary and your goal is to collect a lot of money and disappear, then this can also be done. And there's another story where someone wanted to buy an apartment with a trailer, let's call it that. This was shared by our acquaintance, a realtor. What is the story about? The apartment was being sold at a very good price. A decision had to be made quickly, but only after analyzing the documents, which the owners were initially reluctant to show. Only after a thorough analysis of the documents, it turned out that an old grandmother was tied to this apartment. Well, some grandmother of theirs, or maybe not even theirs. In fact, that's not really important. There is a form of real estate purchase where you buy property at a lower price, but you have to support the person or people tied to this apartment for the rest of their lives.
What does it mean to support? How is that?
It means providing them with everything they literally need for their livelihood.
And if she says, well, I need to go urgently to Spain?
No, well, it should be something reasonable. That is, you have to provide for their basic needs for this person. Okay, interesting. And they have to live there. They don't pay for the apartment, no utilities, nothing. So overall, they reside there. You understand, like any additional expenses are usually borne by the person themselves. Here you understand that this is a completely unrelated person. They can also get on your nerves to the maximum every day, to the point that by buying such an apartment, you can get into a lot of trouble. There are stories where these people outlived those who bought the apartment. Well, if there's a problematic grandmother, she might live all 150 years, right? But overall, the biggest catch, and what? The grandmother gives her apartment, let's say, to you, Stas, and you have to support her for that. Or she sells you the apartment at a big discount, and you have to support her for that. And she is registered in this apartment. It's like in Pirates of the Caribbean. It's part of the ship. That is, it's impossible to unregister her from there until the end of her days. And look, she gives you this apartment and you decide to resell it to someone. To me, for example. And I buy it with this grandmother. What's the catch? This grandmother who gave you the apartment, ideally, you should review the text where she gifted you this apartment. She can revoke the gift and she's like, I don't want to give it to anyone anymore. I want to continue living in this apartment myself. And I just get screwed in this story. And me?
And me?
And I paid you money.
No, but if she revokes the gift, she revokes it from me, so in that case I get screwed.
But you've already sold this apartment. It's not yours anymore.
Well, yes.
And the grandmother is tied to me now.
Ah, well, she was tied to you, okay.
Yes, that's it. The grandmother says that's it.
And who actually deals with this? Are there people who really deal with these grandmothers, all this nonsense?
Look, how should I tell you? The risks that exist. That is, we didn't buy this apartment because there was this grandmother.
So this is a story, kind of from the people. Legally, in Poland, is there a similar tool where you can be gifted an apartment in exchange for a promise to support someone? Am I understanding correctly?
Yes. It's very important to check the apartment for any utility debts to ensure there aren't any. People registered there, unknown, to ensure no business activities are being conducted there. Because later it will cause you huge discomfort or even some financial expenses when using this apartment.
And is there a tool, yes, to specifically check utility debts?
Yes, of course.
So there is some tool that...
It's no secret, most importantly. You need to go in person to the housing office of that building, the housing and utilities office, and request all the information there regarding this. Yes, simply because of your approach, they might send you away rudely. Here, you just need to know how to negotiate or hire a realtor for these purposes who won't let you proceed without this certificate. Or go somehow negotiate or convince the seller to provide it to you. Such a list of documents to ensure everything is clear. Okay, understood. But it's not only landlords or apartment sellers who deceive. Buyers and tenants also manage to do so. In fact, they find ways to deceive people. We encountered a case, it was a month ago. A very wealthy, very beautiful girl with an avatar generated by AI. She wanted to buy a house here for herself. She's from France. For 10 million zlotys. Of course, we offered her a couple of houses, but then it turned out that she was almost ready to fly over, but she had some issue with her account. She needed, not just a couple of houses, I think we even went and showed them. Well, you understand, a lot of work was done.
So, was she physically near you and you were showing her?
No. Everything was done remotely via video call, so there was something Things were found for her, calls were made, realtors went and showed the places. Yes, a lot of work was done. When a month passes and you think she's ready, she's chosen, she's flying in, looking and taking it, she already has all the money and so on and so on. And she also had, I spoke with her personally, she had an Indian accent, I don't know from where. What's the deal?
In English.
Yes, in English, because she doesn't speak Polish and I don't speak French. That's how it turned out.
I think it's just interesting, maybe you were talking to a girl who speaks Russian with an Indian accent.
The funny thing is, you're already calculating in your head hundreds of thousands of zlotys in commission. You already know where you're going to spend them. But she says there's something wrong with her account, or something with the ticket, or something else. In such moments like, you'll send 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 so she can pay for it. You're already friends. You've talked a lot with her. You already. Well, you understand, right? She does this not only with the realtor, but she can also communicate like this with the seller, for example. Just help me say to fly out. Or something, well, in short, some kind of nuance like that, or I'm out of money already. In Poland, and the French account is blocked. Well, in general, they have many reasons. You might get stuck for a couple of thousand zlotys because you've already earned there. Hundreds of thousands, well, what's that? A couple of thousand zlotys compared to the final profit, especially from someone you've known for so long and have done so much work together. You understand, right? Got it. There's a very interesting point. In Warsaw, on Kinov and Mina, there are a number of passages that are rented out. The owner of one of them shared a great experience with us. The tenants pay. Not the full rent amount, but half. And the owner receives exactly half less. He has been suing them for years. 5. But the court constantly justifies the tenants. Because the tenants say, we have a bad location here. We were stuck with this bad location because they don't show everything. Not all the sales. We barely manage to pay the rent and we have nothing to pay it with. Meanwhile, we pay as much as we can. And the court justifies the tenants because they don't pay the full amount. They pay exactly half. It's beneficial for them. For 5 years now, the owner hasn't been able to evict them to start.
Regarding his commercial property.
Regarding his commercial property, yes.
Can't he terminate the contract with them?
In fact, such contracts are concluded for a long term. There, 5, 10, 15, 20 years. Without a valid reason, you can't terminate the contract. So he wants to terminate it, but they don't leave saying, well, we are paying.
I see. Unusual.
It's unusual. I don't recommend doing that. The problem is that the owner himself doesn't have significant savings to start a full-fledged legal court process in some Supreme Court. That is, it starts from 70,000 zlotys, which... And in fact, the owner is going around borrowing this money just to somehow part ways with them, with these Eastern friends. Another apartment owner shared how his tenant constantly damaged something in the apartment, like appliances, broke a pipe, and other things, just to pay less rent. That is, for some reason, he couldn't pay the full amount. He damaged the property and said, well, look, this isn't working. Or like, my pipe burst. My things got flooded, so basically, I won't pay everything. This is, yet, another type of dishonesty, fraud, unfortunately, where apartment owners can suffer. At the same time,
let's also talk about renting an apartment with children if you're the owner and rented it out without a fixed-term contract.
Children cannot be evicted. Listen, a fixed-term contract is actually a big fiction because it contradicts the Constitution. People came up with the fixed-term contract like to evict you if you can't pay, but ideally, if you refer to the Constitution, you can tell the owner, yes, I signed a fixed-term contract, but go to hell. I'm going to keep living here. Ideally, with or without children, you cannot be evicted in Poland. You can officially be a squatter here, actually, just because you didn't know about this and you signed a fixed-term contract. You think that they can evict you. The owner comes if you don't pay and says, get the hell out. And you're like, well, yeah, I signed a fixed-term contract. I'm getting the hell out. Well, no, you can say, no, I'm staying here, and they can't evict you. They especially can't evict you if the temperature is below 11 degrees, meaning during the heating season. They especially can't evict you if you have children, minors. That is, by law, they cannot be left on the street. You can ask the city administration to find them alternative housing. But the city administration, in about 3 years, will find something, and the conditions must not be worse than those they lived in.
And is there a way to protect yourself somehow? If you are a property owner?
This is when you make the tenant believe that they can be evicted by the law and they haven't checked it, they didn't know. There are owners who do not rent out the entire apartment, leaving a room, a bathroom, or 2 square meters for themselves where they can live. Yes, officially they can live there, use it, and they can enter the apartment and make the tenants' lives miserable. So much so that they simply move out. That is, the tenants cannot, for example, change the locks. But again, on the other hand, we do not recommend signing such agreements. Would you want the owner to be able to enter your apartment at any time because they have 2 square meters there? Especially if you are a woman, especially if you have children? Of course, it's better not to sign or agree to such terms. There is really no compromise. That is why apartments are not rented out to just anyone. The owner always prefers to take an extra but a month or two to find a suitable type tenant.
Even if it means losing an estimated 10,000 zlotys in rent over those 2 months. Yes, of course. But even choosing wisely, there are no guarantees. Because usually the unreasonable ones pretend to be as reasonable as possible. Isn't that right? That's the point. Well, yes.
That's why they look at the history on the card statement, salary, and so on.
The residence card, that's why they pay.
To ensure the person is more or less reasonable. Our people don't understand this, especially when they're asked about their salary, to show their salary, where the money comes from, and so on. That is, our people get offended by this. It's hard to explain to them. Well, put yourself in the owner's shoes. What should he do if tomorrow you decide not to pay? Sometimes people really do hold castings, some interviews. So that happens too.
Yes, I once went to a casting in Krakow. There was a line, a live queue of people. I realized it was a casting. I approached and then left.
I ended up in a similar situation. There were about 10 people too. And everyone there, and the Poles, especially the young ones, were all my peers. We were around 20, 22, 21 years old. And these guys, they were jumping around. Oh, how I like this, how I like that. Well, I immediately turned around. Like, not my story, but in general, that happens too.
Well, it feels like you're a modern slave. Like, they have to choose you as a slave and give you the chance to live in this barn.
Yes, that's the last but not least culprit. The first one took an advance payment for his services and disappeared. So this is probably the most
standard. The standard of our firm. Only this way for our company.
There are realtors who, without having the property in their offer for sale, negotiate with the owner to sell at an inflated price or rent at an inflated price, so that this margin becomes their commission on the deal, which overall I think is very, very wrong. And usually a person who is completely, blindly disbelieving in what is happening will at least double-check some other listings or something else. So you can protect yourself from this, but unfortunately it also exists.
I would say this about realtors. It's that some have started taking payment in advance for their services. Well, like, I'll look for an apartment for you to rent or buy if you pay me 50% of the average fee in advance. In principle, I understand their pain and it's fair. Now, as a client, there's no guarantee that they will provide decent apartments or that it will suit you. What if the person sends you an apartment once a month, but you need to move in within 2 days? So there could be a reverse situation like that.
This year, we started taking advance payments for rentals.
Yes.
Specifically when someone is looking for an apartment with our help. And I'll tell you why, because 5 out of 10 during the process simply changed their mind about living in Warsaw. They moved to another city or something else.
Yes, or they simply found it themselves through another realtor.
Or they found it themselves because there's a similar apartment, more or less, and they don't need to pay a commission, right? Or a friend is moving out and it just happened that way. There are many reasons, really. Or they expected different apartments, prices in Warsaw altogether. Or they thought the agent would have something twice as cheap. Then everything else on the market? Yes. Unfortunately, that doesn't happen. Such an apartment at half the price doesn't exist either. Well, because the owner of this apartment also more or less understands that it should be priced higher. That's why we started taking a deposit in a ridiculously small amount, but it already serves as some kind of, some kind of trigger for people who just come for... Yes.
If you can afford it, then why not, right? You have leads, clients for this. You can choose, so I would do the same in your place.
I wouldn't say we have many clients, especially for rentals. We have very few clients, or rather not even clients, but people who, just came to ask, and the realtor spends a day, 2, 3 a week doing something for them, right? Well, yes. And for this, at least for doing something, he at least has something left for gas. That's about it. I think on the contrary, this should be standard practice. And on the contrary, look, our contract states that if we don't get in touch within 24 hours, we return the deposit. If we don't offer any options that the client can find themselves, meaning they find it and send it to us, asking why we didn't offer it, we return the deposit. This means that we didn't meet the expectations placed on us.
Well, fair, I understand.
Yes, it's fair. Indeed. Of course, we don't do that. We don't misuse the deposit and we don't work poorly, quite the opposite. Regarding the realtor, one thing is said, another is on paper. That is, sometimes a realtor might say, I won't charge you a commission, and then later say, well, you misunderstood. Or, is it possible that you sign something? An agreement. Not for real estate services, but a brokerage agreement, and you end up signing just some kind of consultation. So, an agreement with a realtor, a one-time consultation, and what is the essence of these agreements? The agency, it has a number of different insurances in case of a realtor's mistake. If it's a reputable agency, for example, I told you something, you bought or rented, then something went wrong, you lost money, the insurance, it covers that. Well, or if the insurance doesn't cover it, then a reputable agency covers it. If you signed a contract for consultations with someone unclear, the insurance won't even cover it. Well, because it's not a service provision, it's just a one-time consultation after which you went and did something. So it's also important to look, even when working with a realtor, actually, why is it important to sign a contract? Because you are protected by law from the unintentional mistake of a realtor. Well, or someone else who is involved in this story. So, in addition, how to protect yourself from fraud? All contracts must be adequate, transparent and signed, most importantly. In other words, you can ask the realtor to request information on whether they have insurance. Absolutely. In fact, when working with Polish colleagues, when we collaborate on their properties, for example, this is the very first question they ask.
To you, right?
Yes.
Do you have insurance?
Yes, of course. So it's a normal practice. If hypothetically there is something good on the market, an agency with good work standards and ratings, sometimes realtors, individuals or someone else might pretend that they work exactly here. So this can be double-checked by asking the agency. It's the easiest and fastest way. This is your agent, and you had a situation, I believe, where someone pretended to be your employee. Yes, that's correct. So, well, it was a really strange story. This agent worked at another agency, B, while our agency is A, yes, MoCo. He claimed that he worked at MoCo while simultaneously working at that second agency, B. And neither we knew about the client, nor did the second agency know about the client. So he wanted to take the entire commission for himself. Yes, and actually, it's not so much the commission that's regrettable, but the damage he caused. Because for more than a week, either he didn't offer anything to the client, or something like that. Well, in short, the client started complaining to us about our supposed employee. The employee who, you understand, right? So reputationally, we suffered at that moment. Therefore, it's better, of course, to check, but only if, it's important for you to work with a brand like Google, or McDonald's, or our agency. If you don't really care, then most likely such a service will be available.
Thank you for watching this video. I believe it was useful for you. And if so, support us by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. And below the video there is a comment section. Ask your questions, discuss the episode, and we will be happy to answer your questions.